Hey everyone, it's Elaine Hamilton from the Reiki Centre. Today, I was thinking it'd be quite nice to have a little chat around Reiki structure, rules, institutions, my favorite hobby horse. I know a lot of you have said to me that when you find my channel, you kind of feel a bit of relief because there's an awful lot of Reiki politics out there. And there's an awful lot of Reiki rules, regulations, and kind of judgment. It's like if you're not doing it this way, then you're inferior. This is not the real Reiki. This is not the original, the OG Reiki. And so I was prompted to make this video because it heartened me to hear that Frank Ajava is planning, or maybe has already stepped down from his role with Jikiden Reiki. I'll put a link in the video that my lovely friend Renee had made with Frank, and there's promise of more information. I think that'll be a very interesting interview. But essentially, I've been following Frank Ajava for many years now. He's author of Reiki Fire, really a very important book that started opening up the Reiki history. I don't know how old it is, 25 years now. And so he was one of the first people that kind of spoke out against the very rigid rhetoric that was coming out of American Reiki. So when Hawayo Takata brought Reiki in to America, she trained her students and she gave a very different history of Reiki. And when I first learned Reiki back in the 90s, I was given the same history, but I think I was very lucky in that my Reiki master didn't really believe it. So he was like, it doesn't really make sense when you think about it historically. And of course, within years of him saying that, Frank Ajava's book was maybe out already or was coming out around the same time. And then there was a big hoo-ha, right? Like the Reiki community was up in arms. Oh, I love a bit of drama. Ooh-ah. And I kind of stayed out of it because I was like, I'm not here for the drama. I'm here actually for the opposite. I have enough drama in my life. I don't need more drama from the Reiki community as well. So I think I've always been really lucky in that in my own spiritual growth, I've never felt the need to hook into rhetoric. Like I've never really been one to follow gurus and even when I've been doing training in certain modalities like Kundalini yoga, and even my own Reiki master, I mean, may he rest in peace, he was a very charismatic personality. And a lot of Reiki teachers around me who trained with me idolized him and put him on a pedestal. And I never understood that. Like, I was like, yes, he's charismatic. He's got a big ego and he's lovely and he's very knowledgeable and he opened so many doors for me. But he's not a guru. He's not someone I'm going to follow I'm not going to hang on his every word. And I don't know, I've just had that rebellious, autonomous nature. Luckily, really luckily, right? So it's kind of nice when I see other Reiki masters kind of breaking away from their molds as well, or just getting to the point where they're like, well, I want to explore this for myself on my own without all the pressure of having to follow a certain philosophy or a certain way of teaching, or like these rules and regulations that we put in place around Reiki, pretty much on everything. And again, hold my hands up. I've said this many times. I was very much in that mindset that Reiki needs to be done a certain way, but I just wasn't as tight, I think. Like, I think my lineage was quite loose when I look at it compared to other lineages. And that definitely is thanks to the way that John and Esther taught. They were much more around self-empowerment, around, how you do the Reiki on yourself, how you heal yourself. And very much this kind of when you come into helping others, should you want to, it's very much the Reiki energy going in, and you're not the healer. Like, you're not the one doing anything. So you're not pulling stuff out or putting stuff in or moving things around. That's none of your business. Your business is to be an open channel for Reiki to flow. And then when the Reiki flows, it's up to that person receiving the Reiki to then do what they want with the energy, right? It's a gift. It's what you are giving to that person for their own highest good and their highest healing. And that is up to them. It's not up to you. And I think that very strong kind of commitment to personal growth and self-empowerment is really what has kept me on this particular Reiki path for the last 30 years, because it allows for growth, right? If you're in a very tight system, then eventually you're going to outgrow it. And then there's this real difficulty, because when you outgrow it, you then have to leave the entire system. And that can be kind of devastating, right? If you've built your entire community around that system. Now, if there's no room for growth, then either you get stuck, that you might be happy with that. Like, you might be kind of, for some people, they get into certain spiritual communities and that's all they want. They want the community. So then they do everything to stay where they are because they don't want to rock the boat. But it's kind of counterintuitive, because Reiki is universal life force. It's a force. It's a movement of energy. And so that's constantly changing and evolving and growing. And so if you're stuck in a system, eventually that's going to feel really uncomfortable. So my guess is that's kind of what's happened to Frank. And I know it happens to lots of people. And so the question is, when you're thinking about your own Reiki path, your own Reiki journey, is, are you feeling restricted? Are you feeling constricted? And does that concern you, because it means you have to leave communities or systems? And ideally, if the answer is yes, then I would say leave it and find one that is a growing mentality. And so the growing mentality is much more permission to shift and expand and be different from the other people in the community. So there's no judgment, right? And this is actually quite difficult to find, to be honest, because people get really hooked into their own belief structure, thinking that it's like their belief structure is what is going to hold the community in place. But ultimately, the community, like, what is the values of the community? If the values of the community is to hold the system in place, then you kind of know what you're getting, right? Like, that's what it's going to be. And so that's where the rigid rules, and you'll notice that when you go in, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of judgment around whether you're doing it right or wrong. So you can kind of spot it a mile away. Like, when I went into Kundalini yoga, which I still love, but when I went in, again, I was very lucky that I was introduced to it by a teacher who didn't really buy into the rhetoric either. So when I've gone into these modalities, I've always managed to find teachers who just don't buy into the BS. They're just in it to move along the foundational principles. And the foundational principles of Reiki is that universal alignment, right? So it's our alignment to the life force. We are life force, I guess you could say, in a certain frequency. Like, we as a biological system are vibrating in a smaller system. And then we are part of a bigger system. And so the idea that we have to all follow a certain stream kind of smacks of orthodox religion. We have to be like this and everybody has to be like this. And you just need to look around to see that that's not true, because people follow whatever they follow. And all around the world, there are different religions, there's different beliefs, there's different modalities. And even within the Reiki, there's different types of Reiki, there's different ways of doing Reiki, and none of them can be wrong. Like how can it be wrong? Because the whole purpose of universal life force is that it is inclusive. By the very definition of universal life force, all is included. So the idea that you can do anything wrong is kind of ridiculous. I mean, I don't understand how you can logically put that into a place. I don't even know how you can put that into your head and let it. I mean, there must be a lot of dissonance that happens. And so that feeling of discomfort, and maybe you were in that position. I was certainly in that position where I was just like, okay, so we're saying that Reiki is self-empowerment, finding your own flow within the greater universal flow. And yet me as a Reiki master has to attune you so that you can get into your flow. It just makes zero sense. How is that even a thing? But I was taught that, and I kind of was like, okay, I bought into it for a while, and I kind of did it like that. But I guess luckily for me, because I have a research background, when anomalies started to appear, so people would start to attune themselves, like my daughter, for example. My daughter, when she was born, had Reiki coming out of her hands. And to me, it was really obvious. And she wasn't attuned. She just came out like that. And I started noticing people who were coming to my introductory talk. They were getting one attunement, not the full set, and they were keeping the Reiki was active and flowing, whatever. Then when I started my distance attunements, I was getting people saying that they were starting to do the Reiki healing before I gave them the attunement, and they were describing Reiki exactly as I would expect them to describe Reiki. And this was before I even attuned them. So I could see that all these anomalies were starting to pop up, and that made me really curious. So rather than say that's not possible, that's not right, it's not my experience, so therefore it can't be your experience, rather than saying that, which is ludicrous, by the way. Like if you're sitting there telling somebody else that their experience is not valid because you don't have it, it's just like you're a lunatic. Anyway, this happens a lot. I know it happens a lot. It's probably happened to you a million times. And if you're really honest and brutally honest with yourself, you've probably done it to other people a million times. Again, I know I have. But the point is that when you start to notice that the evidence is stacking up against the belief, then it's time to let go of the belief. And this is something I really encourage you to do, not only in the Reiki world, but also just with everything. So look for what is the logical evidence, like what is actually happening, and take it all in. Like this idea of anomalies that is just ignored by science is again ridiculous. Like what is that? Like when we talk in science about spontaneous remission in illness, for example, why is that not being studied? Or when they talk about my brain's gone. Oh, you know, where you have the the placebo effect, and people talk about that. Oh, it's just placebo. Like what? No, this is a massive anomaly of what we expect to happen. So we should be studying that. And I think that this is something that we need to take more seriously. Like each and every one of us is having a very unique human experience, and every single part of our experience is valid, and it's happening. Like it's clearly valid because it's happening. So how could it be less valid than that, right? So if you're noticing in your Reiki practice that there are certain things that just don't resonate with you, then be right about it. Right? Give yourself permission to be right. This is not resonating with me. because it's not resonating with me. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's just no, not doing it that way. And give yourself permission to do it in the way that resonates with you. Because ultimately, you can't do it wrong. Like universal life force, by definition, includes everything. So as you grow with your Reiki journey, I guess there is always a difficulty that you have to leave certain communities behind in order to open up to the next one. But there are certain communities that just allow you to be yourself and they celebrate that and they want that for you. And that's the kind of community that has longevity because then you can be in the community, you can grow, and you can discover for yourself what works, what doesn't work, what's right for you, what's not right for you. And so I think this idea of right and wrong, if we turn it into a much more personal judgment, then that will hold us in much stronger stead than if we try and blanket. So it's like, oh, well, my teacher says this is wrong, so therefore it must be wrong for me too. No, your teacher says it's wrong for them. And obviously, the way they word it, they might be quite strongly judgmental that it's therefore wrong for everybody. But as we've already said, that's ludicrous. So, what is right and wrong for you? What feels resonant and what doesn't? And here's a clue. Okay. When things are natural, they feel easy, they feel natural. When things are not resonating, they don't feel natural, they feel difficult. So, if you literally, I'm not joking, if you just set up your life to do what's natural, okay, what's easy. And then there will be a lot of you that are like, no, 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 I can't do that because what's easy is sitting on the sofa. I bet it's not. I challenge you to sit on the sofa for 8 hours scrolling or doing whatever it is that you think is easy. And then you check in at the end of that 8 hours and ask yourself, was that really easy? Do I really feel natural and normal and aligned now? Because I'm telling you, it is hard. It's hard to doom scroll. It's actually really hard because it's hard on your energy. It's hard on your mental well-being. It's like, it's so hard. It's much easier to go for a walk in nature, to lie in the sun, to eat well, to exercise. These are actually easier things to do. So I would say that obviously, if you are going to follow the relax and easy natural path, you also have to be brutally honest with yourself as well. It's very different. Like something that's easy and natural is not the same as lazy. And I know that's a really loaded word because we tend to call ourselves lazy for sitting doing nothing. That's not lazy, actually. That's rejuvenating, right? So it's also getting clear on what the word lazy means, and starting to kind of come into your own self. It's like, what is going on with me and how am I navigating my life? And you'll be so shocked at how much of your shoulds and shouldn'ts and do's and don'ts actually come from external sources. They don't even come from you. And even the stuff that does come from you, when you really analyze it and look at it, like, why do I think I need to do that? Then you'll be able to track it back to somewhere back there that was telling you, pushing you that you need to do this. Right. And it takes a while to unpack this for sure. And for a lot of times, there are lots of things that will continue to serve you. And there are things that you will drop for a while and then you will recalibrate and then they'll come back into your life. I found that with loads of things. So I'll be very intensely doing a certain practice for a while and it will really serve me. And then suddenly I just stop doing it. And then 6 months, 6 years later, I start doing it again. And I'm like, oh, this is really good. Right? This is great. This is the right time to bring it back in without the why did I stop doing this? I mean, like all that stuff is just BS, right? Like, don't do that to yourself. Don't add unnecessary tension and don't bully yourself and don't criticize yourself. Just dedicate yourself to allowing your truth and authentic resonance to be your priority. That's your priority, right? Not trying to keep a bunch of people or communities or systems in place so that you can feel safe and secure, even though it feels really uncomfortable. No, like once you start to release and become more and more authentic, you don't need those structures or people. Like you don't need other people to validate that you're living an authentic life, right? When you're living an authentic life, you're just living an authentic life. You don't need someone else to come up and congratulate you and say, "Oh, well done for being authentic." You you just don't need that. It's like people, whatever people think, it's like, well, so what? Because you're clear that you are giving yourself full permission to be yourself. And that's all you need. That's literally all you need. So I think I've gone off on a bit of a ramble. Before I pressed the thing, I knew it was going to be like this because I've got all these different ideas in my head at the moment. But what triggered this whole rant, I guess, is just when someone as prominent as Frank Java starts to go, this suit doesn't fit me anymore. Uh, it's it's kind of joyful, right? It's joyful for those of us who are already not fitting in the suit. Probably less joyful for those who are also still in the straitjacket and feeling a bit offended that someone's got free. It's like religion, right? When you leave your religion, watch out. There is fallout because you leave a bunch of people that feel, I think, secretly jealous that you've gone off and found your freedom and liberation personally. But that's just my judgment. I'll admit that. But there is a lot of fallout when people leave structures that they've been a big part of. And I find that really odd, actually. But that also is a hint that the structure that you're leaving clearly was pretty judgy and pretty insecure. Because if you say to a good friend, "Hey, I'm leaving my job, or I'm leaving the country to go and explore different pastures to go out and see what else is there, or to advance myself." Like, you wouldn't say to that friend, "How dare you? How dare you leave? How dare you change your mind? How dare you expand your horizons?" Right? So that only happens in very insecure systems. So I would be kind of like more looking at the system that is in shock rather than the person who's leaving. I think that is a much more interesting investigation. So that's just something for you to consider. Like, are you in systems that no longer serve you? Are you feeling that you are being restricted by certain rules and regulations? Are you being really honest with yourself um, around what's working and what's not working for you? And sometimes it can be really nice just to do a bit of a sound check, like clear the slate. Like, if you have a whole bunch, if you have 10, 20 rituals and whatever spiritual practices that you're doing every day, and if you don't do them, then whatever, I would say it's a really good idea every now and again to spring clean. We're coming into spring, so perfect timing. Just have a look at some of these and just be really honest with yourself. Like, if I dropped one or two of these, would it actually feel better in my system? And start noticing when you do these rituals, is there an element of fear that if you didn't do them, something bad would happen? Because that's not really freedom and liberation, is it? That's like, okay, I'm just going to get in this cage and shut the door behind me. And freedom and liberation is being fully authentic to live whatever life you want. So if you're doing the ritual because it brings you joy and a sense of freedom and elevation, great. That's great. But if you're doing it because you kind of think, "Oh, if I don't do this, I'll lose my community, I'll lose my friends, I'll lose my approval rating, I'll lose my students, I'll lose my whatever. No, not a good reason, really. Not a good reason, if your priority is to really lead an authentic and liberated life. But that's just my opinion. And as you know, I have many. Ay, ay, ay. All right, guys, that's enough from me for one day. Thanks for listening, and yeah, be well.